Welcome back. Thanks for staying with us as we get more reaction from the breaking news story. We are still joined in studio by our business editor, Xolani Mbanjwa, talking to the unemployment figures that have just been released. Of course, not much hope for those who are job seekers. Xolani, you were explaining the unemployment, the word unemployment. We misinterpreted it the last time these results were unveiled, and we weren't really sure what exactly unemployment means and how it affects the labour survey.
It's actually how the statistics South Africa actually defines it. The unemployment, when it comes to the quarterly labour force survey, it is described as a person who is actively looking for employment. And those who are, discouraged, work seekers are actually put in a different category that has, that is expanded definition of those who are not, who have given up looking for work. But there are some highlights that are quite good when you look at some of the numbers. There has been employment did not increase in utilities and transport. Industries that gained the most jobs were in finance, community and social services. So there has been a good a number of sectors that have actually brought on a number of people. And I think right now we are being joined by Risenga Maluleke, the Statistician-General, who is going to be talking to us about these jobs numbers.
Very well. Of course, we got him on the line. A very good morning to you. Thank you so much for your time. As the news has broken, South Africa's unemployment rate increasing by 7.5 percentage points to 30.8% in the third quarter of 2020 compared with the second quarter. What exactly does this mean, and what does it speak to when it comes to the reality that we're facing in South Africa?
Firstly, let us look at what happened in the second quarter. In the second quarter of 2020, we had 4.3 million persons actively looking for employment. The majority of the people who were usually in our labor force, and indeed those that were looking for employment, had moved to a category called other, not economically active. And their biggest reason at the time in the second quarter was because of COVID-19 environment and COVID-19 related restrictions. So they were seated at home and not looking for employment. About 2.2 million of those have actually come out of that category of other, not economically active, to go and look for employment. And this has increased our number of those that were unemployed in the second quarter from 4.3 million persons to 6.5 million people. And in this regard, that 6.5 million people represents the 30.8%, which is a rise from what we had seen in the second quarter of 2020, which was sitting at 23.3%.
Mr. Maluleke, I wanted to ask to go through the sectors that have shared jobs and those sectors that have actually seen an increase in job uptake.
Let us start by saying that the unemployment rate of 30.8% is not largely because sectors or industries have lost more jobs. It's more a reason of people coming out of being seated at home to actively look for employment. Now, let us look at the industries that have lost jobs. Utilities, as in electricity, water, and gas, have lost about 23,000 jobs. Transport has lost 7,000 jobs. Now, we have lost about 30,000 jobs combined in these two industries. The other industries have actually gained employment. So we can see that these 30,000 jobs that were lost in the two sectors of utilities and transport are a far cry from the 2.2 million people who have gone to increase the people who are unemployed. And indeed, those people came mainly from other not economically active.
Mr. Maluleke, with these grim figures coming out, is there any glimmer of hope? Can we perhaps use the negative outcome to rise up even stronger and begin to build this new economy that President Cyril Ramaphosa has been speaking of?
The Statistician-General's job is to measure and make numbers available. I would like to defer this question with all respect, due respect to policymakers, because indeed, if I start dabbling into giving a glimmer of hope, the problem is if numbers show a different direction in the future, I might shy away from making them available, and as such, I would have lost my independence. So the Statistician-General has to uphold independence at all times.
Mr. Maluleke, discouraged work seekers actually increased 9.1%, but we're also seeing that the Eastern Cape, that number of the expanded definition of unemployment in that particular province was particularly larger compared to other provinces. What is happening in that province?
Firstly, it is not new that the Eastern Cape has always been vulnerable to labor markets. It always returns the highest official unemployment rate all the time. And in this regard, it is always amongst other provinces, mainly provinces that are rural, that return a higher expanded unemployment rate. And one of the things that we see in all the rural provinces tends to be structural in the fact that our spatial arrangements in the country coming out of our historic past tend to put a space in which people are far away from places of employment. And indeed, when you look at that, it happens to create more of your discouraged work seeker in those rural provinces, because they have to travel long distances to go and get employment, sometimes by transport for which they don't have resources. That is why we have a lot of discouraged work seekers in rural provinces than we see in the urban provinces like Gauteng and the Western Cape.
And of course, there are some good news when you look at these particular numbers. Formal sector employment increasing by 242,000, that is 2.4% in the third quarter, and the informal sector employment increasing by 176,000. Put those numbers in perspective, for us, since we are talking about the third quarter, something that is historical, comparing it to the second quarter.
Let me say that the Statistician-General doesn't see interesting news that are coming. The Statistician-General has no taste buds. But what is happening is we have seen the formal sector, all sectors, in agriculture, private households, informal sector, all of them are recovering in terms of the rise in the numbers, that they may differ in terms of levels of their recovery. And as we can see that in finance, for example, we have recovered about 200,000 jobs between the second quarter and the third quarter. In community and social services, we have recovered 137,000 jobs, and 116 jobs came from private households. So all sectors are actually recovering in terms of people who went to get employment. In about slightly more than 500,000 people who increased in the number of those employed, we can see they came mainly from finance, from community and social services, from private households.
Mr. Maluleke, as we round up these figures and, of course, look to some solutions in the future, and we've been speaking throughout the course of this morning to young people who have lost hope about finding employment. As we round up the figures and look to the different sectors, which sectors are likely to bring some encouraging news as we are looking to this new normal and looking to recover?
Firstly, let me start off by saying that young people, especially those aged 15 to 24 years, are vulnerable to labor markets. So are women in our country. particularly black African women as well as colored women. The unemployment rate for young people is slightly above 61%, so it has increased by about 9 percentage points from the previous quarter. Having said that, specifically to your question, is that the job of the Statistician General is to measure all the time. I cannot get into the space of which sectors, and I'll give you the reasons. Today we are seeing the sector of finance recovering with more jobs. In the next quarter when we measure, we may come back with another sector. Now, such fluctuations, and they do occur in the economy from time to time, are matters that can be dealt with by policy makers when they want to look at which areas they can invest in for more recoveries in the job market. But certainly the Statistician General only has to measure, be it the economy in the form of GDP, unemployment, prices and others. And once we have measured, we rely on avenues and media like yourselves to reach out to the public. So if you allow me to confine myself to my little corner, I'll do so.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for your time. Unfortunately, we've run out of time. There you have it, Statistician-General Risenga Maluleke, giving us a sense of what these big numbers mean for the country's economy and affairs. And of course, we're going to have to leave it there for now as Xolani, Mbanjwa and myself say goodbye.